14th minute of a roller coaster. 95. In 1894, the machine developed enough lift to take off, breaking one of their restraining rails and being damaged in the process. Maxim then abandoned work on it but would return to aeronautics in the 20th century to test a number of smaller designs powered by internal combustion engines. 96. Clement Ader Avian 3, 1897 photograph, one of the last of the steam-powered pioneers, like Maxim ignoring his contemporaries who had moved on, see next section, was Clement Ader. His EOL of 1890 was a bat-winged tractor monoplane which achieved a brief, uncontrolled hop, thus becoming the first heavier-than-air machine to take off under its own power. However, his similar but larger Avian 3 of 1897, notable only for having twin steam engines, failed to fly at all. 97. Ader would later claim success and was not debunked until 1910 when the French army published its report on his attempt. Learning to glide. The Biot Massier glider, restored and on display in the Musée de l'Air. The glider, constructed with the help of Massier and flown briefly by Biot in 1879, was based on the work of Muillard and was still bird-like in form. It is preserved at the Musée de l'Air, France, and is claimed to be the earliest man-carrying flying machine still in existence. In the last decade or so of the 19th century, a number of key figures were refining and defining the modern aeroplane. The Englishman Horatio Phillips made key contributions to aerodynamics. The German Otto Lilienthal and the American Octave Chanute worked independently on gliding flight. Lilienthal published a book on bird flight and went on, from 1891 to 1896, to construct a series of gliders, of various monoplane, biplane and triplane configurations to test his theories. He made thousands of flights and at the time of his death was working on motor-powered gliders. Phillips conducted extensive wind tunnel research on aerofoil sections. Using steam as the working fluid. He proved the principles of aerodynamic lift foreseen by Kiley and Wenham and, from 1884, took out several patents on aerofoils. His findings underpin all modern aerofoil design. Phillips would later develop theories on the design of multiplanes, which he went on to show were unfounded. Starting in the 1880s, advances were made in construction that led to the first truly practical gliders. 4 people in particular were active: John J. Montgomery, Otto Lilienthal, Percy Pilcher and Octave Chanute. One of the first modern gliders was built by John J. Montgomery in 1883. Montgomery later claimed to have made a single successful flight with it in 1884 near San Diego, 98, and Montgomery's activities were documented by Chanute in his book Progress in Flying Machines. Montgomery discussed his flying during the 1893 Aeronautical Conference in Chicago, and Chanute published Montgomery's comments in December 1893 in the American Engineer and Railroad Journal. Short hops with Montgomery's second and third gliders in 1885 and 1886 were also described by Montgomery. 99. Between 1886 and 1896, Montgomery focused on understanding the physics of aerodynamics rather than experiment with flying machines. Another hang glider had been constructed by Wilhelm Kress as early as 1877 near Vienna. Otto Lilienthal. Otto Lilienthal was known as the Glider King or Flying Man of Germany. He duplicated Wenham's work and greatly expanded on it in 1884, publishing his research in 1889 as Bird Flight as the Basis of Aviation, Der Vogelflug als Grundlage der Fliegekunst. He also produced a series of gliders of a type now known as the hang glider, including bat-wing, monoplane and biplane forms, such as the Dewitzer glider and normal soaring apparatus. Starting in 1891, he became the first person to make controlled untethered glides routinely and the first to be photographed flying a heavier-than-air machine, stimulating interest around the world. He rigorously documented his work, including photographs, and for this reason is one of the best known of the early pioneers. He also promoted the idea of jumping before you fly, suggesting that researchers should start with gliders and work their way up, instead of simply designing a powered machine on paper and hoping it would work. Lilienthal made over 2,000 glides until his death in 1896 from injuries sustained in a glider crash. Lilienthal had also been working on small engines suitable for powering his designs at the time of his death. Picking up where Lilienthal left off, Octave Charnot took up aircraft design after an early retirement and funded the development of several gliders. In the summer of 1896, his team flew several of their designs many times at Miller Beach, Indiana, eventually deciding that the best was a biplane design. Like Lilienthal, he documented his work and also photographed it, and was busy corresponding with like-minded researchers around the world. Charnot was particularly interested in solving the problem of aerodynamic instability of the aircraft in flight, which birds compensate for by instant corrections, but which humans would have to address either with stabilizing and control surfaces or by moving the center of gravity of the aircraft, as Lilienthal did. The most disconcerting problem was longitudinal instability, divergence, because as the angle of attack of a wing increases, the center of pressure moves forward and makes the angle increase yet more. Without immediate correction, the craft will pitch up and stall. Much more difficult to understand was the relationship between lateral and directional control. In Britain, Percy Pilcher, who had worked for Maxim and had built and successfully flown several gliders during the mid to late 1890s, constructed a prototype powered aircraft in 1899 which, recent research has shown, would have been capable of flight. However, like Lilienthal, he died in a glider accident before he was able to test it. Publications, particularly Octave Charnot's Progress in Flying Machines of 1894 and James Means The Problem of Manflight, 1894, and Aeronautical Annuals, 1895-1897, helped bring current research and events to a wider audience. The invention of the box kite during this period by the Australian Lawrence Hargrave led to the development of the practical biplane. In 1894, Hargrave linked 4 of his kites together, added a sling seat and flew 16 feet, 4.9 m. By demonstrating to a skeptical public that it was possible to build a safe and stable flying machine, Hargrave opened the door to other inventors and pioneers. Hargrave devoted most of his life to constructing a machine that would fly. He believed passionately in open communication within the scientific community and would not patent his inventions. Instead, he scrupulously published the results of his experiments in order that a mutual interchange of ideas may take place with other inventors working in the same field, so as to expedite joint progress. 100. By 1889, he had constructed a rotary engine-driven bicompressed air. Octave Charnot became convinced that multiple wing planes were more effective than a monoplane and introduced the strut wire-braced wing structure which, with its combination of rigidity and lightness, would in the form of the biplane come to dominate aircraft design for decades to come. Even balloon jumping began to succeed. In 1905, Daniel Maloney was carried by balloon in a tandem wing glider designed by John Montgomery to an altitude of 4,000 feet, 1,200 m, before being released gliding down and landing at a predetermined location as part of a large public demonstration of aerial flight at Santa Clara, California. However, after several successful flights, during an ascension in July 1905, a rope from the balloon struck the glider, and the glider suffered structural failure after release, resulting in Maloney's death. Adding power. Whitehead. The number 21 monoplane seen from the rear. Whitehead sits beside it with daughter Rose in his lap. Others in the photo are not identified. Gustav Weisskopf was a German who emigrated to the U.S., where he soon changed his name to Whitehead. From 1897 to 1915 he designed and built flying machines and engines. On 14 August 1901 Whitehead claimed to have carried out a controlled, powered flight in his No. 21 monoplane at Fairfield, Connecticut. An account of the flight appeared in the Bridgeport Sunday Herald and was repeated in newspapers throughout the world. Whitehead claimed 2 more flights on the 17th of January, 1902, using his No. 22 monoplane. He described it as having a 40 horsepower, 30 kilowatts, motor with twin tractor propellers and controlled by differential propeller speed and rudder. He claimed to have flown a 10 kilometers, 6.2 mi, circle. Whitehead claims are ignored or dismissed by mainstream aviation historians, and although in March 2013 Jane's All the World's Aircraft published an editorial which accepted Whitehead's flight as the first manned, powered, controlled flight of a heavier-than-air craft, 101. The corporate owner of Jane's subsequently distanced itself from the editorial, stating the article reflected Mr. Jackson's opinion on the issue and not that of IHS Jane's. 102. The Smithsonian Institution is among those who do not accept that Whitehead flew as reported. 103. Langley. First failure of Langley's manned aerodrome on the Potomac River, 7 October 1903. After a distinguished career in astronomy and shortly before becoming secretary of the Smithsonian Institution, Samuel Pierpont Langley started a serious investigation into aerodynamics at what is today the University of Pittsburgh. In 1891, he published Experiments in Aerodynamics detailing his research, and then turned to building his designs. He hoped to achieve automatic aerodynamic stability, so he gave little consideration to in-flight control. 104. On the 6th of May, 1896, Langley's Aerodrome No. 5 made first successful sustained flight of an unpiloted, engine-driven heavier-than-air craft of substantial size. It was launched from a spring-actuated catapult mounted on top of a houseboat on the Potomac River near Quantico, Virginia. 2 flights were made that afternoon, one of 1,005 meters, 3,297 feet, and a second of 700 meters, 2,300 feet, at a speed of approximately 25 miles per hour, 40 kilometers per hour. On both occasions, the Aerodrome No. 5 landed in the water as planned because in order to save weight, it was not equipped with landing gear. On the 28th of November, 1896, another successful flight was made with the Aerodrome No. 6. This flight, of 1,460 meters, 4,790 feet, was witnessed and photographed by Alexander Graham Bell. The Aerodrome No. 6 was actually Aerodrome No. 4 greatly modified. So little remained of the original aircraft that it was given a new designation. With the successes of the Aerodrome No. 5 and No. 6, Langley started looking for funding to build a full-scale man-carrying version of his designs. Spurred by the Spanish-American War, the U.S. government granted him $50,000 to develop a man-carrying flying machine for aerial reconnaissance. Langley planned on building a scaled-up version known as the Aerodrome, and started with the smaller quarter-scale Aerodrome, which flew twice on the 18th of June, 1901, and then again with a newer and more powerful engine in 1903. With the basic design apparently successfully tested, he then turned to the problem of a suitable engine. He contracted Stephen Balzer to build one, but was disappointed when it delivered only 8 horsepower, 6.0 kilowatts, instead of the 12 horsepower, 8.9 kilowatts, he expected. Langley's assistant, Charles M. Manley, then reworked the design into a 5-cylinder water-cooled radial that delivered 52 horsepower, 39 kilowatts, at 950 RPM, a feat that took years to duplicate. Now with both power and a design, Langley put the two together with great hopes. To his dismay, the resulting aircraft proved to be too fragile. Simply scaling up the original small models resulted in a design that was too weak to hold itself together. 2 launches in late 1903 both ended with aerodrome immediately crashing into the water. The pilot, Manley, was rescued each time. Also, the aircraft's control system was inadequate to allow quick pilot responses, and it had no method of lateral control, and the aerodrome's aerial stability was marginal. 104. Langley's attempts to gain further funding failed, and his efforts ended. 9 days after his second abortive launch on the 8th of December, the Wright brothers successfully flew their flyer. Glenn Curtiss made 93 modifications to the aerodrome and flew this very different aircraft in 1914. 104, without acknowledging the modifications. The Smithsonian Institution asserted that Langley's aerodrome was the first machine capable of flight. 105, the Wright brothers. Wright glider, coordinated turn using wing warping and rudder. 1902. The Wrights solved both the control and power problems that confronted aeronautical pioneers. They invented roll control using wing warping and combined roll with simultaneous yaw control using a steerable rear rudder. Although wing warping as a means of roll control was used only briefly during the early history of aviation, the innovation of combining roll and yaw control was a fundamental advance in flight control. For pitch control, the Wrights used a forward elevator, canard, another design element that later became outmoded. The Wrights made rigorous wind tunnel tests of airfoils and flight tests of full-size gliders. They not only built a working powered aircraft, the Wright Flyer, but also significantly advanced the science of aeronautical engineering. They concentrated on the controllability of unpowered aircraft before attempting to fly a powered design. From 1900 to 1902, they built and flew a series of 3 gliders. The first 2 were much less efficient than the Wrights expected, based on experiments and writings of their 19th century predecessors. Their 1900 glider had only about half the lift they anticipated, and the 1901 glider performed even more poorly, until makeshift modifications made it serviceable. Seeking answers, the Wrights constructed their own wind tunnel and equipped it with a sophisticated measuring device to calculate lift and drag of 200 different model-size wing designs they created. 106, as a result, the Wrights corrected earlier mistakes in calculations of lift and drag and used this knowledge to construct their 1902 glider, third in the series. It became the first manned, heavier-than-air flying machine that was mechanically controllable in all 3 axes, pitch, roll and yaw. Its pioneering design also included wings with a higher aspect ratio than the previous gliders. The brothers successfully flew the 1902 glider hundreds of times, and it performed far better than their earlier 2 versions. To obtain adequate power for their engine-driven flyer, the Wrights designed and built a low-powered internal combustion engine. Using their wind tunnel data, they designed and carved wooden propellers that were more efficient than any before, enabling them to gain adequate performance from their low engine power. The Flyer's design was also influenced by the desire of the Wrights to teach themselves to fly safely without unreasonable risk to life and limb, and to make crashes survivable. The limited engine power resulted in low flying speeds and the need to take off into a headwind. The Wright Flyer, the first sustained flight with a powered, controlled aircraft. According to the Smithsonian Institution and Fédération Aéronautique Internationale, FAI, 107, 108, the Wrights made first sustained, controlled, powered heavier than air manned flight at Kill Devil Hills, North Carolina, 4 miles, 6.4 kilometers, south of Kitty Hawk, North Carolina, on the 17th of December 1903. 109, the first flight B. Orville Wright, of 109